tell my younger self as far as writing stuff, because a lot of this stuff is organic. You learn it as you go.
It's strange. It's nothing I ever expected.
I want to tell my stories by eliciting emotion in my audience.
So it's an organic process. They sort of layer on top of each other. Each one makes the next layer more obvious to me.
This whole thing could not have gone any smoother.
I usually say squat only in groups of 3. I like to batch it, like squat, squat, squat.
Look, guys, this one's not going to be like normal. It's just not.
Welcome to the Writer's Journey. I'm your host, Lauren Moore, and with me is the mellifluous Kaylin Williams.
That's a big difference. It's like, are you talking or are you doing? What's happening here?
We still have all the pets that think, oh, it's time to eat. It doesn't matter if it's 4 a.m.
My name is Walt, and this is Coffee and Concepts on Keystroke Medium.
All right. Hey, welcome, everybody. Welcome to our third installment of book reading. See, we're getting caught up here at the last possible moment, like me, always cramming in the last few pages. Can't get enough of this story. It's fantastic. I'm here with Lauren and Ken, and we're going to go into the next 5 chapters of Dragonbone Chair.
Next 5. Here we go.
Starting to pick up. It's starting to really get cruising along here.
This was my favorite chapter so far.
Right? Always good. We also are giving out awards today for the best drinking container or goblet, whatever. It goes to Ken Britz for his fancy glass. How do you even put that down? Is there like a holder for it or something? It's like a horn.
Yeah, he's got a horn of plenty in his hand.
A horn of plenty, that's right.
Yeah, there we go.
Glass or plastic?
It's glass. It's glass.
And filled with a beer, a delicious looking, is that a porter? It looks really great.
It's
dark.
A Yingling.
It's a Yingling, yeah.
The state beverage.
Of Pennsylvania.
There you go. Fantastic.
Very nice. They are good beers. Very tasty.
How's everybody been this week? Boy, very good. How's everybody been? Anybody got anything to cover before we dive into the book? New updates or anything like that?
Just got back from a trip to Vermont with my Nana, my mom, and my sister. So just had some peaceful time by the lake, soaking in the sunsets, and I'm really happy to be back to my normal routine and normal workflow, but with kind of that renewed perspective that being out in nature does.
It looked invigorating or reinvigorating. The post that you put up, it looked amazing.
Yeah, it's a very contemplative place.
Yeah. How are the mosquitoes there? I have a reason for asking.
Bad. Yeah, and also invisible. They're like the kind that sneak up on you, and you come back in the house, and you're got 6 bites, and you're like, "Where?
Yeah,
how? I didn't see you."
Yeah. I figured it was with those lakes. That's something I'd never thought about. That part of the country having a big problem with mosquitoes, but it makes obvious sense now that experience it. We went to Sam's the other day, and we had some sort of gnats on the car when we came out. That it was like the Amityville Horror. I swear to God. And we had to go through a car wash because I'm not bringing all these bugs and then parking the car in my garage and having this giant infestation. It's crazy.
Yeah, because they're gonna swarm and then make baby ones and then take over the house.
Just not great. It's not great. I'm not a big bug fan. I'm waiting for the winter to put a stop to
bug
that.
Fan. I think your love for bugs ends in your teen years, because my kids, when they're still at that age where my daughter's running around picking up moths and butterflies by the wings. She gently picks them up. Look what I got.
You're at that stage like Simon who's watching the beetle in the beginning of this.
Yes.
Because beetles can't get you, really.
Yes. Oh, man.
Flying, biting bugs are a no-go. And bed bugs.
No. Ugh.
Bed bugs, mosquitoes. What else? Ticks.
We have a lot of cicada or locusts or whatever you call them around here at that time of year here.
Mhm.
And they are loud, and I forgot how big they are. I was out working on the yard, and they're like these giant. Can you get in the camera things?
Yep.
Nice. What exactly do they live on? Because that's a big bug.
I don't
Remember
know,
how
but
they
we
used to shed and you used to walk around. You're like, "Hey, look what I got!" You throw it on your sister, and just kidding. It's just this.
Yeah, that's what sisters are for. Generally, is to throw bugs at. I mean, let's be real.
Hey. Those things are the stuff of sci-fi, though. They look like aliens, and they've got these big eyes and the claws.
I just keep looking for it to talk to me every time I run into one of those things. Like, oh no.
Did it ever inspire you? Were you ever inspired by a cicada?
No, I am writing a series for Athon, and the aliens are wasp-like, and so I did a little bit of research on them, and I found that very interesting. Did not know how closely wasps and ants are in the same kind of genus or whatever.
They are,
which makes sense because they kind of look similar, but anyway, so
right.
A flying ant.
Yeah.
with a stinger and a really terrible attitude.
Yeah, they're like cousins.
Mm-hmm.
Only one is kind of cute and crawly and could be your little friend, and then one could sting you to death.
Can fly at you and terrify you and make you wreck your car into the ditch if it gets in your car.
It's true. But actually, I kind of like them because they keep the aphids off my roses, so I cheer them on when I see them.
Yeah, in the natural.
Yeah, it's like when we have I don't know, I forget the plant, but it's got a lot of bumblebees that hang around it. Oh. And at first my daughters were like, "Oh, boy, bees." Like, no, they're bumblebees. They don't care about you. Just let them. Just be gentle.
Right.
Just don't. Just let them. They don't care. They
don't
wander around the flower and go about their business.
Well, even a wasp, generally, if you stay away from them, but I still take the risk. So we go to town on them. I'm probably going to go to war with the wasps tomorrow because we're going to grill tomorrow, and they're going to be out on the porch, and they're going to have to go. So we'll spray some dangerous nerve toxins around, and then I'll make some food. It'll be great.
Are they living on the porch or?
Well, we have a screened-in porch to get on the inside, and then they're just like right there when you're eating. So nobody's down with the wasps in this one.
Have you seen that on the internet where you can take like a cup of gasoline and then stick it up in a wasp nest, and then the wasp just kind of come out and die in it?
The fumes just overcome them.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I can't find the wasp nest in our house because we're kind of on a corner, and there's not. Unless I get up on top of the roof, maybe they're down in the downspouts or something. But it's a fairly new build. I don't really know. But so I did some research, and I guess they can range about 1,000 yards. And there's a tree line, probably 400 or 500 yards away from our house. I'm wondering if that's where they're from, or my neighbors aren't just taking care of their own wasp problem and they're coming over to feed on our aphids.
They were downright dangerous when I was a kid because we'd get like a little wasp nest up in the eaves of the house, and when you and I were kids, Scott.
Oh yeah,
we didn't have iPads and we didn't have air conditioning, so our parents' version of air conditioning was go outside.
Exactly.
And what do we got? A stick.
There's your fun.
Try to knock it out off the eave, and then run like crazy.
Yeah,
like crazy when it falls.
Sound like a Darwin Awards coming.
Have Jimmy do it. He'll do it.
Literally poking the wasp nest. Right.
He'll enjoy that. Just watch him.
Well, our dear readers, listeners, if you thought that this was, a WASP discussion and actually it's a book club, this is the way book clubs roll.
It should, yeah.
We talk about things.
Got to get loosened up and check the vocal cords, and we could have sang some vocal warm-ups like we're in choir, but we thought this might be better. Given our relative combined talent. You guys are probably great singers.
You're a great bass player. I've heard tell.
There you go.
I can play the bass a little bit. I do enjoy it quite a bit. It depends. A little bit. It depends.
You too, Ken?
No.
All right, let's dive in. So what do we start with?
Probably better dancer than a singer.
Chapter 11, where it gets good, of course.
Yes. Unexpected guests. This is interesting. I want to hear what Lauren's first impressions are. This is where as you said, the story goes from slow burn, and then the heat goes up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, things are picking up.
It doesn't go up to 11, but it goes up from, maybe a 2 or 3 to 4 or 5, right?
Well, last week, Scott, you said something like, "Man, I just want to connect with a character.
Yes.
Maybe it's Simon, but I want someone to connect with, and I haven't yet connected with Simon." This is the chapter where I kind of locked in and, felt like I was in his shoes.
Yes.
When he gets, he's kind of lost in the castle, and he finds himself on the other side of the dark cabinet thing with Pyrates on the other end, trying to mind force him out of the darkness and reveal himself.
Yeah.
That whole scene, he finds a secret.
He's going to get saved by a cat, and after the past experience with the puppy, you're like worried about the cat. It's like there's a lot of danger here, but it's interesting because you start to engage a lot with the character because he's facing more dire consequences.
Right.
This isn't he's not going to get a lecture this time. He's probably going to die.
That's a good point, Scott, where we talked about a save the cat scenario. And now we have a reversal at the end, towards the end of this, where the cat saves Simon, right? So it starts off with we're in I guess the analog of Avril, and then basically Simon's just hanging out in the hayloft, right? And then who comes in? Towser and a couple of the other men. I always forget the other names.
I don't.
Shem, yeah, and who was it? Shoot, we're drawing the blank on it. But they're talking, and then Towser's just kind of rambling and talking about what happened.
Yeah,
with Bright Now, what really happened, right?
Because I asked that question. I was thinking of you, Ken, when I was listening to that. I was like, okay, so that's what happened.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that, and then lo and behold, it's answered, basically.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, like that totally changes our understanding of that whole scene,
so
funeral scene.
What I'm getting out of that scene is he can't really touch the sword. It hurts him, or
it changes your perceptions of Elias, right? Because you're not sure who's because you have the two sons. The elder son who's the king and the younger son, and there's friction between the two, but you don't know who is the bad son, I guess.
Should either one of these be rooted for is what we're trying to figure out.
Yes.
And Elias is pretty clearly set up as no, but within these 5 chapters, he has some moments where he really seems to care about his daughter.
Yes.
And so now he's more interesting because now he's not just a cardboard. It's like he's got some redeeming qualities. So what are we going to do?
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point, because that's what happens, right? There's the conversation of with Towser. Towser explains he tried to do what Prester John wanted, tried to give the sword to Elias. Elias didn't want it. He didn't want to touch it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
because he didn't want to touch it, or he couldn't touch it.
Couldn't touch it. Yeah. Wanted or couldn't. Yeah.
It felt like he had dropped it, or he had
Well, think about it. Remember what's on the sword, right? It has one of the nails from the tree from Osiris, and as well as a bone, a relic of one of the saints, right? So maybe it's a holy relic, and if you can't touch a holy relic, what does that tell us? What does that tell us about you?
You might need to clean up your get yourself to confession there, buddy.
Yeah, that's like walking into a church and bursting into flame kind of moment. Yeah, that's not good.
Someone see if he can see himself in it.
Yep. And then we flip over to a scene, as you pointed out, between Miri, and her father, right? Which is kind of contentious, right? That even Miri sees that Pyrates is not good for her father.
Yeah, she doesn't like him.
Well, anybody who does like him, except the king, right?
Right.
And he's a priest, right? He's supposedly a priest, but Priest of what?
Yeah.
Figure that one out.
Yeah. There's some, I'm not sure what's going on with all that, but there's, I thought that was a very interesting thing. And she really came across as a young woman or a teenager, because she's like, I don't care that this is the capital. I miss where I grew up. That's my home. And that's exactly what it would be if you were forced to relocate, put in a new school or whatever.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, it's another one
Yes.
of those scenes where you can read it two different ways.
Yeah,
We don't
absolutely.
have all the information. We only have some pieces of information, and the pieces of information we get kind of sound like Miri is, could be kind of bratty teenager sort of thing. But we can tell that there's some missing pieces of the puzzle here. There could be more that she's not saying.
Yes.
That you could read in between the lines, and knowing this author and like knowing how many clues have been laid down before, the chances of me reading another 20, 30 chapters and then looking back on this chapter and going, oh, that's what I missed. Like,
oh yeah.
Again, this is the benefit of hindsight of having read it before. You're like, oh yeah, I get that. I can connect this. But I think it's fun that it's written in a style or a realistic way, in the point of view that you're not getting a lot of telling, right? You're getting a lot of the thinking, but it's not revealing everything that the person is thinking and explaining everything that the person is thinking, right?
Well, that's one of the things I always say. You got to resist the urge to explain. And this book feels like it's explaining a lot, but it's actually explaining what that character would know given their current circumstances and available information, which is not the same thing as an author coming in and just saying, this is what happened in the realm of such and such, and giving you the whole history, like with 100% accuracy. It's a little bit of unreliable narrator, not because they're bad, just because they don't know yet.
Right.
So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I like that. It's tough to do that. I think maybe if you're a newer writer, it's okay to write all of that in the first draft, and then pull it out, right? Because you're kind of, depending on how you write and whether you're a plotter, pantser, or plantser, somewhere in between, you can kind of put that stuff in and then pull it out, move it around, pare it down to come to some of the essentials, right? Or the beats that you want to repeat. Does a good job here, I think. I don't know.
Well,
he said that he outlined this book and that he's an outliner. So, and it definitely shows, but yeah, you can create that magic later just by revising it. It's just that you might end up throwing out chapters.
Yes, you would. Or just throwing out whole pieces of passages that are world building that you wrote, and you're like, man, I don't need that. I just need these little pieces of it, but I had to write it all to get it straight in my head. Just put it in the Bible somewhere to use it for later. At least that's what I'm learning how to do.
Or if you're Tolkien, just stick it in the back.
Put it in the appendix.
Yeah, Faramir almost made it to the appendices.
Made it out. Yeah. And then we get back to Simon. So it's a nice chapter between Simon and Muriel that they're not characters are not interacting directly, but you get their perspectives from a high-born child and the scullion living in the same place at different, points in their lives and their interactions. Right, she's interacting directly with the king, and he's just listening to gossip about the king. Right, so you're getting a lot of different degrees between the two, and then he's off avoiding work. Right. As usual.
The setting also ties them together. In the scene with Miramel, she's looking out on the King's Bay, on the Kinsley,
yeah.
Kinsley, and then later on,
a cove.
It's a bay that the castle
overlooks. It's overlooking a bay and a great sea. Right, it's a coastal.
But then
city.
By the end of the chapter, he thinks he's underneath the Kinsley. When he's down in the tunnels, he thinks he's underneath it. So she's looking at it from
down into the warrens of those parts of the hay hole that were either, which I think are a lot to do with who had built it originally when it was Asua, only because he keeps hearing the voices, right? The voices in his head. So it was interesting because then he runs into, well, not directly, almost runs into Pariades, right?
Yeah, he needs to stop running into that guy.
Yeah, that's a bad guy.
He's a bad guy, yeah. So how did that happen? I was a little unclear about that. Like, I knew he was kind of back behind the wall, sort of, or back behind this. He's like in a supply room.
Yeah, he was in like a room full of like tucked away stuff that people had, stashed in a room that they had found.
A storage room of some sort.
Yeah, storage room. And he was hiding behind some of the crates and barrels and such. But Pariades is using his, I guess maybe newfound knowledge or magic to find him or to force whatever imposes will.
Right.
And Simon's starting to give into it, right? And then the cat saves him. Right? The cat jumps out.
Saved by the cat.
Then he makes a huge discovery.
Yes, then he waits for
he decides to go down rather than
waits for Pariades to leave, and then he's like, I'm gonna go see what he was doing. Right?
Yeah, because he's like, maybe if I shouldn't poke my head out, what if he's still there when I
so
I'll go down.
He goes deeper. He goes down, right? Yep. And then he finds a magical door. Is what he thinks it is. And he opens the door and finds what we've been looking for the last 2 or 3 chapters, Prince Joshua, right?
Yeah.
Big.
Now, Ken, I have a question about the magical door, and it's sort of asking for a spoiler. So you can tell me no. You can tell me I'm not going to answer it. But, okay, so on this door, he sees all kinds of, like, glowing designs, and he feels them, and they feel warm to him, okay? So that's where he's thinking this door has been, like, locked with runes or something. Like, it's got magic on it protecting the door. So here's
Morgana's gives you the answer to that later.
So here's my question. My question is, would anybody have seen and felt the heat, like seen the runes and felt the heat of the runes? Or is there something about Simon that and it allows him to interact with magic?
That was my question.
So he might not know that he has a power, but he does. So we could be having a character who's unaware that he's got any kind of special talent, but because no one's told him, but he's just kind of experiencing it. So I'm kind of wondering if that's the case or not.
I can't really say because, well, I think a lot of it has to do with he was born and raised in the hay hole, right? So I feel like in a way he's connected to it, because he's born there and has lived his life there. I feel like he's in a sense attuned to it. I don't think he has any particularly special powers at this point.
So basically it was just left open. It hadn't closed all the way. The magic hadn't shut down because Priority says something to that effect.
Yeah, Morgana's gives you the answer to the magical door, right?
Because he says he's got to find it or something. He's got to kind of...
It was... we can already talk about it because we read it. Right. It's like a secret door, just a door that doesn't look like a door.
Hidden by magic. It's not
hidden by magic, but not actually like magically closed or magically sealed.
It's not like an actual magic portal.
So the magic that Simon sees is just the hidden magic.
The concealment is not concealed.
Yeah.
So
maybe Simon can see it, that other people see it, but when he goes back down there with Morgana's, he can't see it. So,
I'm going to keep in the back of my head that maybe he's special. But
yeah,
so
I think Simon's special. I mean, we see later that Morgana says something more again to that fact. So
yeah, so he goes and finds Morgana's, and
does he go find Morgana's right away, or does he say, it ends on the cliffhanger sentence of finding Prince Joshua, right? And then it hops into the next chapter, the sixth.
And then he doesn't rescue him right then, which I mean, I guess that's probably actually smart for a boy to go run for help. But I also felt like you're just going to leave him there. He's probably going to be dead when you get back. You know this, right? But this isn't a George R. R. Martin or a Joe Abercrombie book, so he didn't die.
Yeah, I don't think he knows.
Because he would have definitely died in some of these other genres by the time he got back.
Yeah, I don't think he knows what to do, right?
Yeah, which would be
that's a normal reaction.
Yeah. Give him what we know.
Before we hop ahead, were there any particular passages or lines that you liked about chapter 11, Lauren or Scott? I found one one or two I really liked.
Let's see. My passage comes from much later when he sees the river and some roads when he's finally emerged from the castle. But I'm not sure. It's hard for me to notate them because I'm mostly doing audiobook. But let me look while you guys.
I found one that was in the very beginning scene in chapter 11. It's where Simon's sitting in the hayloft, kind of dozing. And he's listening. He's just listening to the prayers in the chapel. And there's a great line in there. It says, the singing voices had wrapped his secret heart in a sweet, cold net of silver. The tender resignation of its strands still clutched him. I think that's a great way to
keep going.
Basically say keep going.
Yeah.
It had been such a strange sensation. For a moment, he had felt himself all feathers and racing heartbeat, a frightened bird cupped in the hands of God. That's great, isn't it? Just kind of captures the emotional feel that he has just listening to the choir or to the monks singing in the chapel. I like that one. It's a good one.
And again, it's like the good guys have a good connection with the birds.
Yes, birds. Yeah, good point.
Because,
nice teamwork there.
Here he is, the frightened bird cupped in the hands of God. So sweet.
There's another one that I think I love, which almost tells you that almost reverses what you think is going to happen. And it's a line, I think, after Simon's hearing Towser's story of the sword. Mm-hmm. And at the very end of that scene, before it goes to Mirabel, it says, everything happens to someone else, Simon decided. Half glad, half regretful. Everything happens to strangers. And you very quickly realize that's not true anymore.
Yeah.
It almost kind of telegraphs it, but you're like, are we going to keep going in a slow burn? Nope, we're not. It's gonna change. Those are my two sentences in that chapter that I really liked.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed that.
I picked out a whole section, so I don't know if you have time for all that, but
don't worry. Well, if you had a whole section in that.
Well, chapter, I just really like that section where he's hiding and Pirates is coming for him.
Oh yeah, if you can read if you find a couple of passages or paragraphs that you like that you can read. Go ahead. It's great reading. I feel like it really captures. I mean, we know Pirates' meanness, but it captures a bit of his.
All right. So for the audience who hasn't read the book, but still wants to hear, what's this chapter they keep talking about? What's this scene? All right. So it's on page 164. Simon crouched back among the dry goods and prayed that Aiden would stop his heart, which seemed to be beating like thunder. He felt his gaze drawn upward against his will until he stared out between the sagging shoulders of the sacks that hid him. Through the narrow gap, he could see the alchemist's bleak face. For a moment, it seemed Pirates looked right at him, and he nearly squealed in terror. An instant later, he saw it was not so. The red priest's shrouded eyes were focused on the wall above Simon's head. He was listening. Come out. Pirates' lips had not moved, but Simon heard the voice as plainly as if it had whispered in his ear, "Come out now." The voice was firm but reasonable. Simon found himself ashamed at his conduct. There was nothing to fear. It was childish foolishness to crouch here in the dark when he could stand up and reveal himself, admit the little joke he had played. But still, where are you? Show yourself. Just as the calm voice in his ear had finally convinced him that nothing would be simpler than to stand and speak, he was reaching for the sacks to help himself up. Pyrates was black eyes swept for a scant moment across the dark crack through which Simon peered. The glancing touch killed any thought of rising as a sudden frost shrivels a rose blossom. Pyrates' gaze touched Simon's hidden eyes, and a door opened in the boy's heart. The shadow of destruction filled that doorway. This was death. Simon knew it. He felt the cold crumble of grave soil beneath his scraping fingers, the weight of dark, moist earth in his mouth and eyes. There was no more words now, no dispassionate voice in his head, only a pool, an untouchable something that was dragging him forward by fractions of inches. A worm of ice clasped itself around his heart as he fought. This was death waiting, his death. If he made a sound, the merest tremble or gasp, he would never see the sun again. He shut his eyes so tightly that his temples ached. He locked teeth and tongue against the straining need for breath. The silence hissed and pounded. The pool strengthened. Simon felt as though he were sinking slowly down into the crushing depths of the sea. A sudden yowl was followed by Pyrates' startled curse. The intangible throttling grip was gone. Simon's eyes popped open in time to see a sleek gray shape skitter past, leap over Pyrates' boots, and streak to the hatchway, where it bounded down into darkness. The priest's surprised laughter scraped out, echoing dully in the cluttered room. A cat? After a pause of half a dozen heartbeats, the black boots turned away and moved back up the aisle. In a moment, Simon heard the ladder thong squeaking. He continued to sit rigidly, his breathing shallow, all of his senses alarmed. Chill sweat was running into his eyes, but he did not lift his hand to wipe it away. Not yet.
That's a great scene, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you felt like it was a tempting, right? Then it was a grabbing and kind of seizing his mind, right? So it's a calm voice. Nothing would be simpler. And then, then it was death, right? So it really,
yeah, there's like multiple things going on. First, he can kind of like hear a voice, and then there's like a pool of the will. So that's like 2 powers. And then there's something that's like the necromancy thing. It, sounds like zombies rising from the dead, only he's like the body rising from the dead or something. Like there's some kind of like evil death corpse-ness going on. That's what really freaks him out. How do you think he resisted the Force in that scene?
I don't quite think he resisted, right? He was about ready to reveal himself, right? And then the cat was weaker.
So if the cat hadn't been there, you think he might have given in?
I think he was resisting just not successfully.
Yeah.
I think this scene shows that Pyrates has power, but it's not refined, right? Like he knows there's something there, but he can't distinguish between a person and a cat. As in terms there's a living being there, and I'm going to make it come to me.
Which makes you wonder. So he's obviously speaking to it, some sort of mental telepathic kind of conversation, but he obviously can't hear the thoughts of who he's speaking to. Right. So he's just kind of broadcasting that. So what is his perception? Like I said, is it magical? Does he hear something because he has extra keen hearing, or just a gut feeling because he can't hear the thoughts, or else he would obviously know Simon is about to wet the bed here.
Right. yes. But his breeches.
So that was fortunate that the cat was there.
Yes.
Well, this isn't the first time Pyrates' attention has been drawn by Simon, and it's not the last either.
Yeah.
Is there something about Simon that like things are attracted to, or like a certain smell, like a mental smell or something? Like, is there something about Simon?
Can magic sense magic, or
detect soul?
Yeah. I guess we'll have to see.
Well, I don't know. I think because the scene we see later with Pyrates. We could talk a little bit about it later, because when it comes up, you see that he doesn't notice Simon at all, right? But that's because he's got his mind focused in other areas, right?
He's got a lot going on.
Yeah, he's got a lot going on.
Because Morganus basically says that if Morganus uses his magic, he'd be signing his name to it. Just someone like Proteus would know he was there. So it does say that using magic is like sending up a flare.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would make that's consider that a rule of this world building is that magic, people can see other people's magic or somehow sense it, detect it, something like that.
Yeah, and I think Morganus doesn't want to telegraph his power.
He doesn't want to show his cards yet.
To a known bad guy, right? Yeah.
Not ready for that fight yet.
Not ready for that fight. So chapter 12, 6 silver sparrows, right? This is where Simon comes stumbling out. And the first person he thinks of, right, is Dr. Morganus, right?
Yeah. And he makes his way as quickly as possible, given all of his normal roadblocks in the castle.
Right. And then Morganus basically says, he goes and tells, I want to tell you something. No, come back later. Right? Back to the hand. Come back later. Right. And then, a very short scene later, he eats dinner, eats dinner and comes back. And then
because he tells him, he says, you need to act normal. So go do
act normal.
Do your chores.
Yeah, again, a little bit of teaching, right? A little bit of teaching. Don't reveal everything that you know right off the bat there, Simon. Everything's
of course,
on your
he's
face.
preparing. While Simon's eating dinner, Morganus is preparing to take action, we assume.
Yes. Right. And then he follows Simon back through the passageways to the door. One thing that's interesting, again, I want to point this out only because I've read the new trilogy, is that little sphere that he has shows up again later in 30, 40, 50 years later in the later series, which is, I thought that was a nice touch of capturing these little elements that were there before and get forgotten. Right. So he has a little bit of magic. He goes down there, and then he thinks it's Simon's doing, it's a magical door, and he's like, and he just, we're gonna wax on it, and it opens. He's like, no, it's not a magical door. It's just hidden by magic.
But he spends some time looking for where to whack on it.
Yeah, a little bit of a twist of the, speak friend and enter, or the thrush knocking, at sunset. The last rays of, I think, autumn, I believe.
Yep.
Again.
Yeah.
So they find Joshua, and Morganus has a little bit of lockpicking, I don't know, gel to get out. So Morganus has got a lot of multi-classing going on here. He's a little bit of a magician, a little bit of a thief. A little bit of an alchemist as well, right? So they get him out. Basically, Simon's the heavy at this point.
Right.
he's
Lifts Joshua, carries him, shoulder carry, back to the lab.
Which, I mean, and that's the thing. I don't know if we're going to board on realism, but for him to carry, even to carry Joshua, even in his wretched state, would be an enormous physical feat for a. How is he now? How old do we think he's 14 or 15?
He's 15, I think.
Yeah.
I think he's 15 because you
you
meet
ever
him
tried to
when
carry
he's
a
14,
person?
and at least a year has passed, right? So he's 14,
Yeah.
15, maybe 16, yeah.
Try to carry a person any distance upstairs. I mean, they go for a while, and I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah, you remind me when we were when I was on my boat, we used to do fire drills, and we used to always do we had a 150-pound dummy.
Yeah.
That would be, we used to call him Oscar, and he was he would always be the unconscious man, and you'd have to get him out. And they would never put him like somewhere easy so you can get him out. They always be on the lowest level. To go down there, put him across your shoulders, and carry him up the ladder to get out, all while wearing the oxygen mask and everything.
When I was on SWAT, if they're nice to us, they would pick the smallest guy on the team to be the downed officer. But every now and then they'd pick one of the big guys.
They pick the big guy.
And it's So anyway, that's probably non-essential to any discussion of the book, but in any book or movie,
well, it gives you an idea of how long has Joshua been gone. Maybe almost a year. And if he's been wasting away, maybe he's not as heavy as he once was, right?
Even if he weighs 80 pounds, 80 pounds of dead weight.
Yeah.
Well,
he's got to be at least, I'd say like 150 even, right? I mean.
Yeah. And depending how big, I guess Simon is getting kind of big, but
he's tall, right? He's tall. So he's definitely probably in the same weight range, even though he's a bit lanky, right?
So it's a little bit of taking some liberties with that, unless he's trying to imply that Simon has some sort of extraordinary physical strength.
No. I mean, he is a strong lad.
Like the readers will accept that he carried him. It's all good.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, it doesn't tell you what's the timeline, right? He's probably just dragging. This is struggling the whole way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The writing.
Days later.
Days later, yeah. By the next day, we've got him out of the hole.
In the writing, Tad makes it like really clear that this is extremely exhausting.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very well done.
And then he gets him out, right? Because he's got a stitch in his side, and then he has to carry him all the way to Dr. Morganis's room, right?
And he thinks he sees someone with a hunch on his back too, like one shoulder up and one down.
Yep. Inch, right?
And it turns out to be Inch.
Gee, Inch is going to come back at the least opportune time, and probably not for a good reason.
Exactly.
Grumpy, jealous Inch.
And then so he brings him home, or brings him to Dr. Morganis, and then what does he do? Right.
He, takes care of his
gives him
wounds.
the magical drop.
Takes off the irons, but leaves the one shackle on his hand.
Yeah. The one shackle on his missing hand, right? Yeah, a present from his
brother.
A memory.
He says it's from his brother, but he also said he never saw Elias there. He only saw Pirates and some unmarked men. So we still don't know if Elias even knows that Pirates took his brother and has kept him for something tonight.
Right. Then you get the twist, right? Where it's like, okay, everything's good to go. Go home. Go back to your room. Pretend nothing happened. We'll work on this tomorrow, right? And you're thinking,
he says that
what's going to happen? And then
he said that to Simon, right? But does he say that to Joshua? No.
No. He says that to Simon, right?
Yeah, Joshua.
We're gonna work this out.
He keeps in hiding.
Yeah.
But the twist is, before anything can happen, Inch has already tattled on him.
Inch has already blown the whistle.
Right. He's already blown the whistle, right?
Well, and
yes.
I just had a thought. That's what we're talking about. I lost it.
It'll come back. It'll come back to you.
Hopefully.
So what does Morganis do, right? He has a Gandalf moment, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, Joshua already is escaped, right?
He says, "Here's the map. Do your thing. Look for the such and go." And then
Simon's kind of in the background watching Morganis do all this stuff, giving the restorative, showing him the map, showing the red line. Simon's kind of looking at it, but he's like, I don't know what's going on. And then Joshua leaves, and then Morganis is like, okay, pretend nothing happened, and then
there's a knock on the door.
All hell breaks loose, right?
Yeah.
Pirates shows up with a whole bunch of men, an Inch, and Morganis just he goes all Obi-Wan. Right?
Yeah.
Sends Simon away, right? Sends Simon to follow after Joshua. Which is the only thing he can really do.
Morganis basically lights himself on fire with magical fire. Is that what he's doing?
Yep.
So that he can fight the bad guys.
Yep. Well, fight the bad guys, but also, I guess, maybe think of it as, if his entire building is on fire, they can't get into the passageway, right?
Right.
To where
he's buying time,
right? Yeah, he's buying time. So, and it's a great moment. It shows Morganis. This is what we were talking about before, right? Morganis doesn't show his hand until he has to, right? And then he just goes all out.
Yeah, well, this is pretty big signal flare he's sending up turning himself into what almost looks like a human dragon, like fire-breathing dragon, in his own laboratory, and he burns it all down, except for.
Are we assuming that Morgana is dead from this encounter, or was that fire he could survive?
I never got the indication that Pirates was going to die. He was not that dumb. I don't know.
Yeah, but when I was listening to it, I was like, the way Simon made it sound is it looked like he was burning as he attacked, but maybe I just pictured it wrong from the descriptions.
Yeah.
For a brief moment, Simon heard the harsh, choking voice of Pirates intertwine with the sounds of Morgana's final agonies. Then there was a great crack of light and an ear-thumping roar. A hot whip of air flung Simon down the passageway, blowing the door shut behind him with a noise like the hammer of judgment. Stunned, he heard the grinding, splintering shriek of the roof timbers collapsing. The door shuttered, wedged shut by many thousand weight of scorched oak and stone.
The final agony of Morganus made me think that he died, or we're meant to believe that he died.
Yeah, Morganus, I think, did sacrifice himself, but I don't know
because he collapsed the whole place.
Yeah.
And off we go.
Almost kind of like taking down like the arch of a doorway or something like that. You're not getting through. I'm taking it down with me. Yeah.
Nobody's coming this way.
That's overall, I thought a great chapter. Really kind of each inching up the tension very well.
It says that Morganus thought that saving Joshua and Simon was worth the ultimate sacrifice.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they have to be very important to the story in some way.
Which is funny because there was a line, an even funnier line, because earlier on when Morganus they were getting Joshua, and Simon's just peppering him with these questions, and eventually at some point Morganus just says, "Simon, there are more things you don't know than there are things that I do know. I despair of the imbalance. Now close your mouth and let's hurry."
That might be my favorite line right there.
That's the famous is like, I've done more things than you've been alive, I've seen things.
That's a dad line right there.
It's a fatherly line.
I fear for our future with the way the youth is going. Good job, Simon.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah, and the other sweet line, the last thing he says to Simon, "Go, my Simon," he breathed, and he was voiced in flame. "It is too late for me. Go to Joshua." He calls him
great.
My Simon.
My Simon. He did say something before that too, right? Which he says, "I must make provision for you too, just as I promised your father." I took note of that. So
it strengthened that
there's something special about Simon, something about his heritage that has tied him to the Hazel, to Dr. Morganus, to Rachel. Something about him is special. You don't know yet. So.
It's an important fantasy trope. Reading the book that Brian Cohen recommended on tropes, it's Jennifer Hilt wrote it, but her favorite trope is secret baby.
It sounds like a romance trope too, right?
Romance trope, but it's like Harry Potter's a secret baby. Luke Skywalker's a secret baby trope. Luke Skywalker
and Leia, two secret babies,
and Rey.
There's a few others that I also listened to that book because it came an audiobook, and as I listened to it, because she'll take a story and put like 50 tropes. I was like, there's a lot of tropes, but a lot of them applied to fantasy, a lot of them applied to the story, but that's one of them.
And then, like, as an author, so you two are authors, why do you think they're tropes? Is it just because an author can't think of anything better, so he throws it in? Or is there a reason?
I think tropes, so people take tropes the wrong way, and I think tropes are like basically a starting point. It's shorthand, and then it's what you do with the trope. So, like, the secret baby trope in this is way different than Harry Potter, which is way different than Star Wars, which is way different than, I try to think of a few others. It's a very popular, it's in so many books and movies, but they're all different. So trope doesn't mean it's the same. Trope means it's kind of like a signpost.
Well, I think tropes are pointed out as tropes when they're done badly.
Well,
or when they're overused, right?
Like, so another trope in this is forced proximity is in almost every story, because without forced it's almost like more like a principle if you think of the trope, because without forced proximity, why don't the characters just leave each other alone, and then there wouldn't be any conflicts? Like, man, this Pirati guy's dangerous, I'm out of here. And then the story,
but
he has to stay because he's a kid who lives in a hayhold and he can't leave. So it's forced proximity. So that's another trope. But anyway, so I kind of go.
Forced proximity.
If you didn't have the forced proximity, the end.
And forced
and then
exit.
they all left and happy, and it's over.
Yeah, forced proximity and forced exit. Like, forced proximity is great because this is third person, but there's a whole lot of information we need to know, and somehow Simon ends up, in the barn as he hears Towser get the story. In the supply cabinet as Pirates goes to check on Jazua, in the hallway with Joshua on his back when inches in the distance, he just kind of ends up forced proximity with all the little bits of information that we need to know. And if not, then we get it from another person's perspective. But you need to have that with third person POV because we don't have that.
You opened up something about Simon Says, that a little bit more of his awakening when he comes running back to tell Morghennis. He's not, he's no longer listening to secondhand knowledge, right? Gossip. He's got knowledge, and knowledge is power. He's like, nobody knows nothing. I know the most important thing in the world, right?
Yes.
And he grasps just a little bit of that feeling of actually knowing something.
Yeah. Instead of listening to stories, he's doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
And seeing things from afar, right? He's got firsthand knowledge, and it gives him a strange feeling, right? I thought that was a nice moment as well.
So he's experienced forced proximity so far, but he's about to experience forced exit, right? Where he has to leave.
Have forced proximity with about 4,000 white spiders here in a second.
That's right. He goes into chapter 13. Auspicious chapter, right? Chapter 13, In Between Worlds.
If he wasn't an orphan and didn't just lose his father figure, his mentor figure, then he would be staying behind at the Hayhole, and it wouldn't be a story. It wouldn't be an adventure story because he'd be stuck at home. But because he's this orphan, this secret baby orphan, he is positioned to be sent out, and we, the readers, get to go with him.
And this is the hero's journey, right? So leaving the normal world, right?
Leaving the normal world, and there's no going back. You can't go back to the way that things were.
Yeah.
Because bad stuff.
That ship has sailed.
Yeah. Or collapsed on your burning
ground. Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'm just going to have to do something a little bit different now.
Yeah.
I like this chapter. I find it seems to wander as much as Simon's mind does. Right? He gets lost. He thinks things are crawling on him. He's stepping on things that are crawling.
He's hearing voices.
He's hearing voices
that are right half the time.
Yeah, that are correct. And the spiders are biting him. That he feels like he's dying, and it's just little bites.
Yeah, he has some hallucinations where he thinks he's in like a paradise, kind of this beautiful room, and he's like, "This is not actually a place I want to stay at." And he comes to the forge, and he's like, "I should run to those guys for help." But he's getting smarter now. He's like, "That's not going to solve my problem. That's going to put me right back in the castle with Pirates."
Well, he's warned by these voices in his head, supposedly in his head, not to go by the forge thing.
Yeah. And is that because of the white foxes or whoever built this place, or?
Yeah. Are the Scythy voices in his head warning him or not?
Maybe.
And I love that he just he half-asses remembering the map. He's like, I can't remember. He's like, I think I can just keep going.
Well, he's used to knowing where he's going because he's all over the castle, but this is a whole new level of castle exploration.
This is the part where he did not explore, right? Which probably should have spent some time down here. probably would have found Joshua a lot sooner, right?
Oh yeah. Well, they set that up early in the book that there's a lot more to this place than you know.
Yep. Yeah, and Simon gets again that first hand knowledge of it, right? And the voices are taunting him along. You get a lot of scenes of the forge, the dreams, the voices, the other things, and then he stumbles upon the stairs, right? The Hanja stairs, and he climbs up and makes it out, right? That's pretty much the whole chapter is just his wandering. And I like how it's written just because it's just throws all kinds of stuff at you, and he's all by himself, right? So are the voices his voices or the voices of of the Scythe, or is he imagining things? Is just a part of his mind kind of just trying to deal with the trauma of what's just happened, he spent,
and how long is really passed, because when you're in like isolation, which he's not really in isolation, but he's in total darkness. I'm taking it. Well, he has the globe, but not always.
Yeah, he ends up losing the globe, right? Or it just fades out on him.
It faded, or because I thought that it came back after I thought it was gone. I thought that he had it again, but the point of it is that 5 minutes feels like an eternity if you've ever been locked in a box or a really dark room. And so you're like, is he down here till he starved to death, or has it just been a few hours? I mean, obviously it's probably I'm guessing it's been a couple of days for him or maybe a full day of spelunking.
I think he's getting voices from the Scythe, and the reason why I say that is there are words and names that he has never heard before, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Prince Ineluki, right? Jingizu. And it's names that he has pretty sure he's never heard before.
Right.
You could hallucinate or imagine that, but it's oddly specific.
Oddly specific.
Yeah. Yeah, page 201 and 202, before the voices were kind of talking to him, calling him moon calf and
you're lost, you're a doofus,
and giving him advice and criticism and making jokes, but also recalling stuff that he heard the doctor say, so as if they were in the room listening too. But then on page 201 and 202, near the end of the chapter, they start talking about an incident he was not at. Trees burning. It sounds like a war is on.
Yeah.
There's a prince mentioned here. Prince Ineluki. The Northerners come. It sounds like a war is about to happen.
Yeah, I think he's wandered into that supernatural world of have you seen the trope of the dead on the battlefield, right? The history that stories that repeat themselves, the ghosts that repeat a battle or something like that. I feel like maybe he's wandered into the ghosts of the past that are repeating that.
He's seeing the story about the men coming and killing the Scythe.
Yeah.
And this is what really happened. And he's seeing it. Kind of like the crow, the three-eyed crow in Game of Thrones, or tree that can see back in time and see the actual event, which was probably really bad.
Is that one of it makes me remember of one of Odin's two crows, right? The memory and thought, right? So memory, things that happened in the past, and so Simon was getting a bit of historical knowledge forced into him, just basically stuck in the dark. Anything else about this chapter? There's a couple of good lines in this that I love. I don't know. I think I like this, how it just really captures his how lost he is, right? And how he's kind of being in the dark and being afraid and being alone and feeling like Pyrades is right behind him. All the bugs and the Scythe ghosts are all tormenting him, and I think it's just a good mix in this chapter.
Well, and I think it sets up as like he has to grow up a lot right now, because he can't just you can't suffer that kind of trauma and remain a child.
Mm-hmm.
because that would be being lost in the caverns. I think would be an extremely traumatic experience, especially if you're young. Well, probably if you're old too, but I think it would be more. It would influence you more in your psyche more when you're still kind of malleable.
Mhm.
When you're older, you can lie to yourself and make shit up. Like, nah, you can just.
I wasn't scared of the dark. I was just.
That's not what really happened. Whereas he's like, that happened, and that was terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he still struggles with his youthful perspective in the next couple chapters.
Yes.
You know, even though like he's starving and he doesn't know what his next move is, so kind of his struggle comes down to survival. Still, he's struggling with his own immaturity that wants to kind of blame everyone else and throw a pity party rather than focusing on, okay, food. Like, where's food?
Well, where does he come out? Right? He comes out in the graveyard, right?
Yeah.
The lich yard, right? He comes out
creepy.
Oh, he has that experience where he sees his mother on the other side of the river of death, basically.
And she's asking him to join her in death.
Is he dreaming, or is he, is he still in the supernatural, in that in between of the real world and the
Maybe it's
supernatural?
a little bit of a gray area where it's
is he in that gray area where he's hallucinating? And because does he know what his mother looks like? They didn't have Instagram back then and pictures of.
And she calls him his real name too, and he's never heard that. I think that might be the first time he's ever.
That might be, yeah.
Heard it. It's not Simon.
Well, in dreams, you just kind of know stuff, even though you really shouldn't know it. So they don't follow the same.
Or your mind answers the question. There's a part of your mind that's, I don't know what that is, and then your mind just a minute later in your dream, you answer it yourself because you just fill in the blanks.
But what Lauren brought up too is that she calls him by his real name, so that makes you think this is less dream and more magical realm, and that it would have been a really bad decision if he had been too weak and gone that route. Well, now the story's over, and then he
and then he died.
The end.
The end. Well, I got to keep outlining that.
The other 400 pages of this book are all notes.
Appendices.
Aren't you surprised?
So he gets out of the lich. He gets past the dream, right? And then he comes upon the Thistleborg, which I take to be something similar to like the Weathertop, maybe, but more like a crowned hill of thistles or bracken.
Yeah.
And then on the hill are the fingers, the anger stones.
Right.
And he sees a fire. So back to what Lauren says, like, food, people, I'm hungry. I don't want to be alone anymore.
Dark, I want light.
Yeah, and he runs up the hill, up the Thistleborg, right, and stumbles through the bracken, and does not stumble upon the friendly fire, of D&D adventurers that can help him on his journey, right? He meets Pirates, right?
Yeah, so I think earlier we were talking about what Elias knows or knew, because he seems surprised at some of this. So he's like a bad guy, but I don't think he's got all the facts, because at least the way I interpret it, there's a moment he's like, well, you're going to sacrifice this guy who was supposed to be here, because that makes it sound like he would have been surprised when they dragged his brother out and sacrificed him.
Yeah. But that's what the evil spirits or whatever wanted, because this count wasn't good enough, did not suffice.
Yes, so he sees the Erkin Guard there, or members of the Erkin Guard, Pirates, and Count, or is it a Count? He's a constable, the Lord Constable.
Yeah.
And they're waiting for another party, right? Which ends up being the White Foxes, right? And they're driving horses that have a cart, and on the cart is what? A coffin, which was hinted at in the past, right? Where somebody was mentioning a gossip where the coffin of Prester John was riding around as a ghost around the countryside or something like that. Right?
He was not a ghost.
Not a ghost. and it's not the king. And this is where we meet number 2 in this book, right? The second sword of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, right?
Yeah.
This is Sorrow. He gets a sword from the White Foxes, and that's given to the king. And again, counterpoint to Brightnail, right? If he couldn't touch Brightnail, and he's given this black sword, what is the sword? Right? What
is Sorrow he can handle.
Yeah, Sorrow he can handle. This is a bit a hint. Right? Interesting. And then you see Pyrates basically, kind of, I don't know, what's the term?
Negotiating the deal?
Negotiates or defers to the White Foxes, right? He kind of begs from them, or finishes the spell or the binding, and kills the Lord Constable. And then again, a hint to what Simon heard before, right? Prince Inaluki, you hear it again, right? Hail to Inaluki, the Storm King, right? So, I like that scene because I feel it really just it goes from bad to worse for Simon, right? It goes from the high of finding Joshua to rescuing Joshua to losing, the dark night of the soul, losing Morganus, lost in the dark. He comes out from the darkness. He thinks he's gotten to a good place, and it just went even worse. Now he finds a guy with the king, with the White Foxes, right? The Norns. So.
Yep. When we're talking about favorite lines, and although it's not a long line, but it's more of just a snippet. But earlier, when he first emerges and he sees all the landscape, and I like the way they described it as the river companioned by the road. Remember that? I thought that was interesting to see, because roads would be by rivers, but it says the road wound through companioned by the river. And I thought that was
so they're kind of like winding together.
Yeah, they go together because back then
a lot of trade went up and down.
The rivers are very important.
I found a really good line in the second scene, where he's out of. It's before I think he sees his mother, but he's out in the lich yard, and he's walking. And I thought a great line here, which I think kind of encapsulates what it feels like to be walking in a graveyard. But he's like, Simon thought for a bleary moment of all the bodies lying deep beneath the earth, the flesh that had once been quick with life, but now moldered in silence and darkness. I thought that was a great line. A teenager normally doesn't think about that. So you're walking in a graveyard in the middle of the night.
You think some dark, creepy thoughts.
This was, there's another great, there's a couple great lines in here, but I really picked up on that one. I loved it. Just how that made you feel. And then I like the small mini break of, they open the box and then it kind of does a little cut. And then it comes back and says, it was a sword, not a person, not a body, not a ghost, not something that's, a jump scare, just a sword sitting in a box. Like that. But I liked how when he opened the box, right? Did you see that? Read that? It was a sword. It lay inside the box, deadly as an adder. It might have been black, but for a floating sheen mottled the blackness, a crawling gray like oil on dark water. The wind shrieked. I like that
That's
part
awesome.
where, like, as you pick up the sword, it's like a howling. So, and that kind of gives me little hints of or suggestions of a magical power, right, that belongs to this sword. And if the wind shrieks, is it the sound of the wind or is it the agony of the wind, right? I like the choice of that word there.
No, that's very good.
Yeah, it's excellent writing. So that's chapter 14.
And hold on. Right at the end,
Yep, go ahead.
Elias, he almost doesn't take the sword, but he does take it. He says, "I will take the master's gift. I will honor our pact." Slowly, the blade held before him, he sank to one knee. Hail to Inaluki, Storm King. Is Inaluki the same name that the voices were whispering in the last chapter, right at the end? That sounded like a memory of a war at the Hayholts.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same name?
Prince Inaluki, yep.
Yeah, Prince Inaluki, they come, the Northerners.
And isn't that interesting, though? This is the High King of Osten Ard. This guy is supposed to be in charge of all the human lands. And he bows a knee to
Elias.
Yeah, Elias is the High King.
And he's bowing the knee to
the Storm King.
And
that's a really, at least to me, a dark moment, right?
Yeah.
You know, imagine King Arthur, bowing to Satan. Hail Satan. No,
this is not good.
Not good.
Bad.
And then that's part 1 of the book, right?
Right.
Simon the Scullion, I think it is, and now Simon the Pilgrim. Basically, Simon's.
As we're looking through the books for quotes, I realize I have not read chapter 15. I thought that I had.
Oh no!
So
we're gonna spoil the heck out of it for you.
Oh, spoil it because I'm gonna read it anyway.
This is this is a lot of this is where they bring down a bit of the tension, right? So it's matching up with discovery of Joshua, saving of Joshua, the loss of Morganus, the flight in the dark, the fire on the Thistleborg and the Anger Stones, and the evil sword and Prince Elias, and then it comes down to basically Simon running away and becoming daytime now, and he's gotten past the fears of the past night, right, and the supernatural. And it's and he does a little bit of great world building here, where you transition from the end of April, which I guess is the beginning of spring, to May, right, Maya, and there's a festival goes on, Beltane and the Maya tree, which is I think analogous to Beltane and the maypole, right, where they dance around the maypole, et cetera, et cetera. That was great.
He's starving. So he's witnessing the villagers, and he's witnessing them have community together, and he's outside of it, and they've got food and he doesn't, and they've got cloaks and he doesn't.
And he wanders around. He's following them almost like a dog, right?
But getting more and more desperate.
Yes.
Right. So he's thinking.
Remember he's a kid.
Yeah.
He's used to mooching off the kitchens.
Right.
Of the castle.
And hasn't had to make food himself. So he's in a situation, but he's thinking thoughts that are like slowly edging towards the criminal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But maybe that will.
But he doesn't want to steal money. He just wants food, right? He wants to steal. He's hungry. And then who does he run into?
He runs into the monk guy.
Was
the guy who stole his.
Yes, they connect the two together. It's like, we're having a great time. And then at the end of that scene, when he met Brother Kodrak, his purse is gone. He lost his purse. Like, oh man, somebody robbed me while I was hanging out with this cool guy over here. Turns out this guy was the one that stole his money because he holds up an empty purse and he's like, hey, that's mine.
Which the reader at the last chapter was probably like, okay, so you just had fun with a stranger, and then at the end of that scene, all your money was gone somehow. And now somehow you've met this guy again, and you're gonna join hands with him and go to a tavern.
Yeah, but it's been months, right? There's a big long passage of time between when he met Kodrak. It's been at least a couple of months, right, since he met him and now.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
this scene gave me total D&D vibes. Like if you are into Dungeons and Dragons and you're looking for your tavern, this is the tavern scene.
This is the tavern. It's got rough people, and he tries to do a dine and dash, and he gets caught. Right, Kodrak. Well, he gets caught briefly, right, and then he escapes, right, and he basically runs off. I think he runs off because Bjornhelm comes up. He realizes he's about to get caught by the Erkengard, right? And and he does realize, I'm still too close to Urchester and the Hayholt. Pirates, run away.
The innkeeper's all fixed up to consider giving him a job washing dishes or whatever to make up for things, and maybe he can get us a good situation, maybe he can get good dinner. But then the innkeeper takes him to some guards to say, hey, do you know this guy? Do you recognize him? And while the guard doesn't recognize him right off the bat, he recognizes the guard. So does he punch him and then run away? Like that?
I think he headbutts him, right?
Headbutts him,
or headbutts him, or butts him into the chest with his head. Just basically kind of bull rushes him and then runs off. Yeah,
kind of a half tackle.
Yeah. Yep. Simon's eyes went wide, and his heart exploded into horrified pounding. This man, the one polishing the sword on one of the bed sheets, wore the green livery of Elias's Erkengard, right? This is where Simon turned and butted his head into the innkeeper's stomach.
Yeah.
Not the tactic I would do.
Not the smartest tactic, but it worked.
But I mean, you work with what you got.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, give him a 4 out of 10.
Oh yeah. It was a great chapter. This was a fun chapter, and like you said, it's kind of lighthearted little interlude before things get dark again.
One thing I noticed. No, go ahead.
I wanted to point out on page 231, Simon was nonplussed by Cadrak. Simon was nonplussed by Cadrak. Nonplussed is one of those words that we look up. As an editor, I look it up because I want to know, does it have 1 S or 2?
Oh, no.
But we can look it up because we're like, what does it mean? Okay, so the original definition, you guys will find this funny. So you tell me, what do you think nonplussed means? And here's the context. With the aid of a long stick that had been leaning against the wall beside him, Cadrak climbed to his feet. Well, Simon was nonplussed. Okay, so sentence gives you nothing.
Not impressed.
Right. So what do you think it means?
I always took it as not really impressed, not excited, not.
I know what the word is because I used it before, so I had to look it up. So I'd be cheating. It means confused.
The original definition is unsure of what to say, think, or do, perplexed. That's the original definition from England. But because American readers didn't know what that meant, and they kept on reading it to mean sure of what to do, think, or say, they had to add a second definition. So the second definition, chiefly U.S., is not bothered, surprised, or impressed by something.
Yeah.
So now the word has
always taken it. And I've read that word
so many times. So if you're nonplussed, can you be plussed? Can you be plussed?
Yeah. I'm impressed. I was so plussed. This book plussed me, and I was very impressed.
Plussed.
I was so plussed.
So are you plussed with this? That the definition of the word is its own opposite.
Yeah, it's one of those words that it could be.
That's how
it means both things because it depends on if you're British or American.
Right. Now you've destroyed quantum physics.
Yep. It means true and false.
Yeah.
It's like the word
in the end.
It's like the word literally, right? Dude, you're literally driving me up a wall. No, you're not literally driving up a wall.
If you use that word, you need to make sure it's clear that it's because it's slangy and the character's imprecise and a little bit ridiculous. But
well, in a horror movie, if you say you're killing me,
kill me,
that could be literal. Killing me.
Well, it's a bit like the word grin, and we talk to Ellen all the time about grin because my entire life a grin is a kind of a little bit of a smile.
Yeah.
But it actually is an ear-to-ear smile, like a maniac.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not what I've ever meant when I said grin, and not what anything I've ever read meant when they said grin. But the actual definition is a crazy person Joker smile, like
It's a showing your teeth smile, like it's a smile that's so big your teeth show. It's huge, huge. It's good.
It's like that's not what anyway.
Yeah.
So, I've toned down my grins when I've learned that grinning is like, no, that's not right. That doesn't make sense.
So I'll do like quirk a half smile, quirk a smile, or
Yeah.
And
Give a half smile or something, because I think that's what you
maybe
need.
this is a quirk of mine, but I hate, because of knowing what grin means, I hate the phrase, his face split with a grin. I was like, did you turn into like the Cheshire Cat? Or
It's just too much.
Literally split.
It's like you're like you've taken grin and you've like leaned all the way into it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. I don't like
Well,
that. You look like that. You look like the Grinch when you like give that.
Yes.
I've used grin a few times kind of as an homage to Ellen, or as a kind of a play on that, where I've made it like ridiculous.
Is that because you know she's your editor at that
I
time?
know she's gonna
she catch this.
But so nonplussed, that is one of those words as a writer. It sounds great and people use it kind of intuitively, but I don't think hardly anybody actually knows exactly or doesn't bother to look it up. So you're right. It has its common usage has drifted to be the opposite of what it actually means.
Right.
And that's the key with lots of words. On a slightly related note, so when I wrote the Last Reaper series, I'm not allowed to use animal references, which slipped in anyway, because it's 10,000 years in the future and they didn't take all the animals with them.
Oh.
And so you couldn't say, you're a bear cat because they didn't, or they didn't have bears or whatever. But my argument was always, we use all kinds of words from the Roman language that we don't know what the hell they actually meant in the original Latin, but it's just a word that survived on its own. That makes sense. Because you might say, 10,000 years in the future, you might say, man, we're on a ticking clock, when nothing has been analog for like 9,999 years. But it's just a phrase that is just stuck in the language and it stays. And nobody understands the original concept, but you would still use it. Like you might say, we need to turn the page, or let's get on the same page. Because I've had stories where I'm trying to write, not use that phrase, and it's awkward to say, let's get on the same screen, which I have used, much to my shame.
I've seen also where people have tried to force a phrase into a new meaning. In fact, this is the same book that I read, this Sweating Grin, and I won't name names because it's good. It's a good series. I enjoy it. But there was ones like when the ship hit the space. I'm like, it's not a crap hitting the fan and a lot of this. It doesn't even have that kind of snappy.
I've used that
right?
too. I use something like that. Hit the thrusters or something, and it's always awkward. You hope people get what you're trying to do, but probably it fails.
Yeah, you have to play with it. I think it's one thing I'm learning a bit as a world builder is if you want to find a phrase that has something that's like, there's lots of discussions about made up phrases and also made up curses, the notorious ones, the ones that are good, or like, stay in the fantasy realm, blood and bloody ashes is very popular. Wheel of Time, curse phrase, but storm is the Sanderson one, and not a lot of people think that's really forceful. And I think the problem with that is the sound of the word, right? A curse word has to sound like forceful. Like that's why if you watch Battlestar Galactica, frack is great because it's harsh and it's adjacent to a word, a
sharp edge to be a good.
Yes, you have to. So if you want to invent a good, good curse word, you have to find something that's got harsh sounding.
It makes sense
sharp
to that a little bit. So one of the phrases I did like in here, because when I was skimming through our phrases, he says something about God's pain, which I'm surprised it's not a real phrase, but I've only ever heard it in this book of fiction, because it seems like something you would say.
Yeah, that's on the nose. If you hear a curse word and you're like, that could be a thing, like that's so natural, that's so realistic, that it just kind of comes out, that could be a thing, then you've hit the right note.
Yeah, and he's got different little phrases, by Saint Reap's whatever.
Well, it's like the Hayhold. I had to look the Hayhold up to realize it's not an actual word.
It's not
that's good.
Sounds good, right?
Yeah.
When I was reading lots of Bernard Cornwell, the The Last Kingdom and those types of things, the Viking stories, and then George R. R. Martin, they talk about the Bailey and all these parts of the castle, and I'm always looking it up. Because I mean, I love audiobooks, but I also like to be someplace where I can look up these phrases I don't understand, like a Garen, the little horses in Game of Thrones. But the Hayholt, I looked it up because it's like I'd read it so long ago. I'm like, is that one of those castle phrases that I never really quite knew what it meant? And so I'm looking up. I'm like, and all of the searches, all of the searches led.
Oh, Scott's in the dark.
Wow!
Get the clapper. Clap your hands. Snap your fingers. Wow,
I guess
really dark.
I should charge it. But,
dark moon.
But I used to have these giant lights for the podcast, and I bought these little things on Amazon.
Oh yeah, I got one of those. Yeah.
And if you charge them, they work great, and they don't take up half your room, and they're not that terribly expensive.
But it looks like they don't last more than an hour and a half.
Because they'll last a few hours. Anyway, but the Hayholt, when I looked it up, all of the Google references were to the Hayholt in this book. So he did a great job with creating an artificial term or name for something that felt real.
What do you think of, so I guess going back to phrases, he did a lot of songs in this chapter.
I don't like songs in books. I've never liked them.
It's very Tolkien, but again, referencing to what he wrote recently, the new series, I think he cut a lot of that out. And I don't know if it's because of modern fantasy readers or, I don't know, disinterest.
So there's a couple of problems I have with songs. One, people writing songs is very hard. If you ever tried to write an actual song, and I haven't seen any fantasy authors that those songs are good.
Well, you don't know what they sound like, right? Unless you listen, unless you watch The Witcher and they sing the song, and you're like, "That's great."
When you try to put it to music, you wind up like singing the Star Spangled Banner to whatever this is, or whatever happens to be in your head, or whatever was the last song you listened to on YouTube. And then the third part I have with songs and books, besides the fact that people are generally shitty at poetry and songwriting, is that I can't perform it well, so I'm only going to hear it to my own performance level. So a lot of if you happen to be an amazing singer, you probably pick this up and be like, "Oh, this is delightful," and you can just mentally sing your way through it. But I think a lot of people, I'm assuming a lot of people like me, I just wind up skimming that stuff. I don't really.
Yeah, is that first song "Ring Around the Rosie"? What's that?
Well,
is this Willie Nelson singing this song? Because that's what I'm hearing right now. Yeah.
Is this Tom Petty?
In Tad's defense, he is also a musician.
Well, he is.
And his editor, one of his editors on this book, Peter at Daw Books, is also a musician.
Oh, I'm sure.
I don't know if they've played in a band together, but I know they're both musicians. And also, if you go to Tad Williams's Twitter, he retweets a lot of videos of different musicians singing and playing and singing his songs, like finding a tune.
And it's probably amazing. And I'm just a curmudgeon that has this my own. Like, that's just my opinion, man.
Well, it forces work on you to imagine the song, right?
Right.
Or are you just reading the words?
It's a lot of work. It takes me out of the story. So the shorter version is when I see songs in a book, it takes me out of the story.
Yeah. Well, and also
you don't like Tom Bombadil's music?
No.
In Tolkien, a lot of those songs, had clues about the plot or clues about the culture. So there's stuff you can pick up on, or about story and themes that are in the song. There's something there. Some of these songs seem to just be world building, which is nice, but it seems to be like, could it be cut for the sake of the plot and pacing? Maybe some of it could.
Well, there's a song.
That's one thing I was thinking. Did we find a place where we could probably cut a little bit?
Yeah, and like I said, that's just my personal thing, and a lot of people may love it, and I should probably just stay in my lane on that. But it's one of those things when I see one, I just groan, and I will pick through it because I'm like, what if there's a clue to the story here? I better read this, but it's hard for me to read because I wind up just skimming it. I'm like, no, I better really read it. And I go back and I look at it again, and then I just cringe when I try to sing it or whatever. So, but anyway.
Well, I guess the question is, there's songs and then there's poems, and there are. I mean, you can do really long form sonnets and you can really bore the reader, but there are certain ones that just resonate, like One Ring to Rule Them All, right? It's a very tiny poem, but man, everybody identifies with that one very quickly because it encapsulates a powerful piece of a little Tolkien history, right?
Oh, yeah.
All basically in your grasp.
If you put the work into to get into the songs, this probably would be a more fulfilling experience. Like the counterpoint on what I was saying is like, so Stephen King will use songs, but he can afford to actually get the lyrics from songs we know. So if you read Stephen King, he'll have like, a verse of an AC/DC song or Eric Clapton or whatever like that. Well, I can immediately hear it, and it has a lot of relevance in the real world, so it attaches me to the story. Like, this is like more real now. But most of us can't afford to pay for those rights to use those lyrics in a book.
Or you could just ask the artist, "Hey, can I use your lyrics?"
You can,
but chances are,
good luck.
Good luck. Good luck. Well, that's the end of chapter 15.
Like I said, I'm very excited about it, and then
kind of lightened up, right? We got a lot of stuff. The story came up, and it came down a little bit, right? Because now I think we're going to see a little bit more highs and lows because Simon's wandering, right? He's alone. He has no friends anymore,
or food,
and he doesn't know how to fish or hunt or.
He can catch bugs and birds.
Berries. I think he got berries is about as close as he got.
Yeah.
And, maybe Morganis taught him the right mushrooms to eat, or the ones that would make him forget who he was for a couple of days. The wrong one.
He's going to be stealing pies out of the windowsills here pretty soon.
Yeah. Real quick, we're about a third of the way through the book. So it's going pretty well, I think. I'm really enjoying the story. I don't know how, Lauren, how are you feeling about it?
Really enjoying. Yeah, definitely caught up. I've already suggested the book to my sister, and she's a fast reader, so she's about caught up.
So she passed you, you're like, oh,
she will be.
We need to do this a little faster. So next read will be 16 through 20.
All right.
Or 15 through 20 for some of us.
Yeah, 15 through 20 for Scott. You get extra work.
I got penalized.
So your homework, your extra homework assignment is to write a song for that Linden
There
Tree
you go.
song.
It'll be a slap bass song. You think that'll fit?
I was gonna say it's gonna be all bass and
all right.
This is a very funky song for the time in here.
So that's going to be our reading next time. I'm looking forward to it. That'll get us much closer to about the halfway point. And then I think the Dragonbone Chair will start sliding into the climax of the story, right? The climax of this book will start moving toward that long ramp towards the end.
I think I'm doing all my podcasting in the dark from here on.
Yeah, we're just gonna have you in the dark all the time.
Lights on.
Yeah.
Just to do like a light that's just
some of us look
like
better this way.
Light. Yeah,
flashing up my nose like we're at a campfire or something.
Exactly like the campfire look. Yep. And then he was in the witch yard. All right. Yeah, this was fun. We're way over time, but we really get into talking about the book and our favorite pieces and our favorite.
It seems like it takes about an hour and a half to do 5 chapters.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's taken us about pretty consistently an hour and a half. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks for coming with us on the journey, Lauren and Scott.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the journey.
Get caught up. Come on. Do it.
Yeah, get caught up. Chop.
Book.
Yeah, for our readers out there, if you haven't read this book, really, this is your chance to get caught up. It's a great story. I'm really enjoying visiting the world again.
Yeah. I'm amazed at how little I remember from the first time I've read it because it's very fresh to me.
Nice.
So that's good. It's a bonus.
Oh, well, you've probably read upwards of 500 books since then, if not more.
Oh yeah. Well, I've probably written. Well, I've written
a few.
65.
You've probably written 100, read 500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've literally
probably distant memory. But I feel like it's a. I won't say it's a comfort read, but I feel like it's kind of like, like I said, a journey you've gone on before, right? Like you've gone to Ireland and you're like, hey, I've been here before. I've been back to Ireland. This is great. I remember that pub and that passage and that castle.
I was telling somebody when I read just for an enjoyment, it's almost always fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes thrillers, sometimes military science fiction, but the problem is I've read most of it, and unless I'm reading it again, it's. But I always gravitate to fantasy. That's what I started with. I really like reading fantasy, and there's lots of different types of fantasy.
I think that urban and not to disparage urban fantasy, not at all, but urban fantasy I think is analogous to say like military sci-fi. It's a large genre with a lot of tropes, right? Yeah. And when you get into epic fantasy, it has a different set of tropes, but it's also much deeper in how it's constructed as a story because it needs so much more world building than urban fantasy, because sort of urban fantasy is typically in the real world, right? It's kind of real world rather than a secondary world where you have to have a lot of bedrock of world and history on top of nothing that was there before.
Yeah, right? I mean, genres are different things. So like in reading a romance, you want happily ever after or happily ever after for now. Mm-hmm. If you're reading a thriller, you want a big twist and and edge of your seat, excitement. But I think when you read fantasy, it's like I want to go to this place and stay there for as long as humanly possible.
Yeah, I want to go and see new places, right? I want to visit new. It's the Star Trek, right? Explore new worlds and new civilizations. To go where no one's gone before as your first time reader, right? You open the book and you're transported to another place. It's very much probably the first true portal, right, to another place. Is portal fantasy is literally picking up a book and reading it.
I think I should probably take a portal to some place with a light switch.
You should have a light, a really like a powerful ring light behind you that just comes on. It's like, oh, there's a portal behind you. Gotta go, guys.
We got school starting.
Sliders.
We're all getting up early, so.
All right. Well, it was nice seeing you guys again and chatting about this book. Looking forward to where it goes next week.
Yep, can't wait. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. Thanks for everyone for joining us, and have a great night.
Night.